Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can I please begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which this session is being held? And can I also acknowledge the amazing speakers so far today? You were just incredible. Can I also congratulate you lot on just being awake? By now, I'm pretty well brain dead. I love the way that people around the world bid greeting to each other, you know, like they say good afternoon or mate. Like, we've got some Kiwis in the room. Like Kia ora koutou, perhaps. In Malaysia, Selamat Pagi. In Iceland, where I was last year, there's a lot of ways, but Guandayan. But my favourite all-time greeting on the planet goes something like, it's from the Gaelic Irish, and the idea is you've got no damn idea what they're saying. But it goes something like, Cade Mia Fulcia Roet, which apparently means 100,000 welcomes to you. I have a question for you. I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind voting on it. It will give me some indication of where to go for the next few minutes after that. Rating of 1 to 10. I know it's a grossly generic question and all that sort of thing, though a 1 is that over the next 20 to 50 years, the world's going to achieve all sorts of horrendous world wars, millions of people will die, it'll be the most horrendous place to live, you know, people will be against each other all the time, you just wouldn't want to be there. A 10 is nirvana. Everyone's in love with each other, there's no more world wars, it's a perfect place, everything just goes totally smoothly all the time. A 5 is like, yeah, it gets by. A lot of lousy stuff out there, but you know, it's like, it'll just get there, you know, lots of things going wrong and lots of things doing okay. Can you all decide on a number, please? Everyone to vote on one of these numbers. Please don't do it on what you hope it will be, but on what you constructively believe it really is based on the evidence that you have exposed yourself to over the years. Are we ready? Here we go. Any 1s? 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. Okay, about an average of maybe 6. Another question. What do you want it to be like up ahead? Yes, I know, Pollyanna and all that sort of thing. Let's start at 5. If it's under that, you're in big trouble. So any 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s? Okay. Just to let you know, given you've got to put up with me being in your face for a few minutes, I'm a 9 on both. Here's another thought for you. About 80% of my work is in education around the world, and in the last week I have worked with around 250 year 10s around the age of 15. The average on the first question, and these were in like socially, economically balanced areas of Queensland. The average was about 4 on the first question. The one on the second was 9. So if you're a parent or an educator, we've got work to do, gang. Let's see how you go with this. I'm going to make a point here. I reckon it's a 9. And by the way, I'm not Pollyanna. I reckon there's a lot of crap out there. However, in between that, the world is the most amazing place, and I've had enough of grown-ups, chronologically gifteds, who keep telling kids that the world is going to be crap up ahead. Because when they hear that message incessantly, they start to believe that maybe it really is going to be that way. And here's some more Pollyanna for you. Predominantly, the world is created by whatever we do today. It's not something that's ephemeral, that's like out there that just happens to us and at us. It's something mainly we construct. Who in this room tries to stay fit and healthy? All hands up, good, excellent. See, you're creating your own future. We do this in all sorts of ways. Who loves their kids unconditionally? I can ask you all sorts of questions that indicate you are clearly trying to plan for your future. It can be done. It's not something weird and freaky. It's actually, you know, more in control than we even possibly think it is. But if we keep thinking it's awful, and they're the messages we keep getting from too many people, mainstream media, social media, certainly fake news. Like, I made a big effort for you lot today. I watched the ABC News last night on TV. I don't often do that. Now, they're the best of a tricky bunch. And I'm not knocking you if you're a journalist. You just get caught up in using the amygdala in our brains to get us to all get, oh, gee, isn't that scary? With all of the horrendous music that starts off the mainstream news as well. ABC News last night, 14 items in 30 minutes. One was a so-called good news story. One was somewhere in between where I couldn't ascertain good or bad. The 12 others were just bad. They were just the horrendous stuff. The latest Donald Trump Twitter feed, whatever, okay? It was all the worst excesses on the planet yesterday. Now, you might say, oh, we need to report that. However, why are we putting out those messages when predominantly the world didn't end yesterday? There was actually a lot of good stuff out there. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. The world's a beautiful mess. That's why we need you to actually help people navigate on this amazing change coming up, because boy, is it going to get accelerating. I love this guy. Jeff mentioned this book this morning. Beautiful book. Swedish Guy. He did all sorts of cross-referencing on massive data on the planet, and he came up with some key points. Let's see how you go with this. Now, around the world, around 10% of people get the whole lot correct. There's about 15 or 20. Here's the first one. In very poor countries around the world, how many girls finish primary school? 20, 40 or 60%? Just start thinking, please. You're going to tell someone beside you in a second. Here's the second one. 30-year-old men spend 10 years on school on average. How many years do women spend? 9, 6 or 3. And here's one into the future. At the moment, we have about 2 billion kids on the planet, 0 to 15. In 80 years' time, how many will there be? 4 billion, 3 billion or 2 billion? When I yell out go, can I ask you please to get into pairs or threes and to quickly tell the other people what you think the answers are? See, here you go.
It's not working anymore, so yeah, she has 10, 5, and 1.
Okay, 10 seconds. Okay, 5 seconds. Okay, legends, wherever you're up to there. Now, I won't embarrass anyone in this room with hands up. The first one is C. A lot of people carry on about how, girls don't get a primary school education. Well, 30 years ago that was the case. Africa predominantly is moving on massively. And can I also tell you, if you want to make the world a better place, arrange a primary school education for every girl on the planet. There you go. If you forget everything else we were over about today, hang in on that one. The data is indisputable. Absolutely. So you want to change life, you do that. Here's a second one. It's 9 years. It needs to be 10. But at least it's not as bad as people think it is. What they're finding is that most adults on the planet, at least in the first world, are stuck in the 1990s. Okay, a lot has changed in the past 25 years. We have seen exponentialities in so many things. And you partly heard that from Josh with his amazing stuff. The third one, as much as we can ascertain, is 2 billion. Who's heard that one about global overpopulation and how we're going to get eaten out of house and home by 15 billion people? Well, already the rate of increase is slowing down. It will probably level out around 2045. Give or take a few years. And you know why it's slowing down? Because of great medical services in poor countries. In the past, parents used to have 8 kids working on the premise that 4 would die by the age of 5, and now they don't. Okay, because mortality rates in children are dropping dramatically. The world's not all bad. It's not all bad. There's this as well. Most of you in this room look under 30. However, as I take a deep breath, if we went back 100 years, you'd be in licorice all sorts. Because, they set the retirement age at 65 thinking no one gets to it, so we won't have to pay any pension benefits. Now it's going to break governments in the Western world. How about this one? UN data, pretty clear cut. Literacy rates are massive, very important. They change people's lives. So 1850, around 1 in 10 people could read a basic paragraph. Now it's 80 to 85%. This is a good thing. Okay, how about this one? Heard that one about how it's all like war and pestilence out there and people get killed all the time? You obviously don't watch enough history movies. Okay, you go back 1,000 years, around 15% of people died from violence. Now it's around 1%. And the last 7 years have been the safest in human history. Could it blow up somewhere and go badly wrong? Yep, you can come back and give me a hard time. In the meantime, things tend to sort of cruise on. Look, we've left the slides for you. You can go through it. I've got a list of a whole lot of stuff there. What has happened in 2019? A lot of stuff. In fact, the world is 5% greener than it was 20 years ago. Yeah, I know. We all want to carry on about how it's all horrible. I mean, I'm a freaky greenie, and I'm telling you now, it's 5% greener than it was 20 years ago. And we've got the satellite data to substantiate it. There's a lot of stuff out there. A lot. Now, in terms of predicting the future, there's 3 perspectives on it. The first one is this. You just can't. It's chance. Okay? Accidents, all that sort of thing. And that definitely is the case with some things. Here's another way you can predict the future. It's called predictive analysis. So I can tell you how many 20-year-olds there will be in Brisbane in 5 years' time. I count the number of 15-year-olds and do a little bit of cross-referencing and work out, growth patterns and all that, and I can work it out. Police use predictive policing all the time. They can come up with a 95% certainty on a crime being committed in a certain place by just putting all the data together. The one that I love the most is this, in terms of predicting the future. You create the damn thing. Now, don't think I'm like New Age mumbo jumbo, because I can be as hard, cold, left brain as you need to be, but I'm telling you now, I reckon that's the most powerful one of the lot. So, when it comes to this, one book I had written a couple of years ago, I put it out through Wiley. It's talking about like today's teenagers in the 2030s, the next generation. And don't I cop some flack from the media in terms of the word extraordinary I used in the subtitle? Yet I'm going to stick with it. Most things, but not all, are going upwards. Now, here's my first point. When the heck did we ever change the future from being a promise to a threat? It used to be something like, wow, you can grow up and do amazing things. Now it's like, bloody hell, I don't want to grow up. What the heck went wrong? I hinted at this one before. That's what I call the world. It's a beautiful mess. Okay, in millions of beautiful things happening today, then some poor child somewhere's going to be abused. It's not a perfect world. It just isn't. Donald Trump's going to put out another 8 Twitter feeds today, you know, like, it's just horrendous. Okay, I reckon we need to stick with this. I call it realistic optimism. So it goes like this, psychologically speaking. Well, a bit glib, but we tend to fit on a line from being totally pessimistic to totally optimistic. So down there, you just think the whole world's a pits, it's horrible, life sucks, the whole scene. Down here, you think everything's perfect and wonderful. Can I tell you now that each end is a problem? You don't want to be at either one of them. Down there, you don't live as long. You feel just horrible about life and all this. Down there, you believe anything you hear. So someone sends you an email from Nigeria saying your great rich uncle just died and all that stuff, and you go, wow, what an opportunity. I reckon we need to be about here, where we stay like open to everything, but still just retain a little bit of cynicism about some weird stuff that maybe just doesn't fit. I want people to be at 90%, but not 100. Okay, realistic optimism. And here's why we can be. Okay, this came out last year, Futures Report on Global Education. A lot of you more or less are involved in education in some form. It doesn't mean like ages of 5 to 18. You know, a lot of people carry on about the pedagogy stuff. What we need to get into is andragogy. There's your fancy word of the day. Okay, that's the art and science of learning for adults. Every organisation needs a lot of andragogy. Here's what it's saying, if you can keep up with this. Up the left side of that is the intensity of learning through one's life. Along the bottom is the like median age of people, you know, through their entire lifetime. So the white represents first world countries right now with education, and the blue, or whatever that colour is, represents it in 30 years from now. Look at the difference. Now it starts at 5, you then boost up in secondary, you peak up in uni, then you drop like a stone and you go sliding down until you die, okay? That's the first one. Here's the second one. At birth, we can monitor the quality of your life. That's certainly physically, and some other ways as well. And it continues on up through life. What governments are finding is they save lots of money by investing in education. Education's not a cost, it's an investment. Okay, and it's an investment in saving money way up ahead in terms of welfare benefits and, you know, people's health and a whole lot of other things. So that's happening. That's one big one. This I love. I'm sure most of you are familiar, you know, with the Sustainable Development Goals that were set in 2015 by the UN with 192 signature countries. If I had a magic wand, I would decree that every organisation on the planet has to focus unequivocally on these 17. The idea is that we will attain them by 2030, and here's why we will. Because in the year 2000, we set the Millennium Goals to be achieved by 2015, and pretty well, they were nailed. And I reckon we're going to do it again. The Global Scouts movement has adopted these as basic policy. I wish all schools did. I wish all organisations did. They're that big. And that, by the way, is fantastic because of the energy focus from everyone on the planet doing it. See, I want kids focusing on those. So when they do all these so-called passion projects, I want them to do a passion project on one of those 17 because it's their future. They're a big scene. They're beautiful. They're special. You know, beautiful comments you were making about technology and jobs and all that sort of stuff. I concur really strongly with you. I think the robotics is going to rescue us from the drudgery. Here's the tricky thing. There's going to be a lot of change. What about, like, you know, less well-educated males? I'll be sexist here, between the ages of 18 and 40. 25% are unemployed in Australia, and they sit and play video games all day or just watch who knows what on TV. Horrendous. You know, where do they go? Because autonomous vehicles come in, and so they used to be a truck driver, the biggest employer of males in Australia, the, you know, vehicle industry. There's going to be a lot of change necessary. People are going to have to learn how to adapt and adjust to new circumstances. It's going to happen, and pretty quickly, actually. So what do we do about all of this? Well, in the book, I was writing about what I call essential capabilities. Now, I know they sound like a bit of a fancy word, but a capability is more than a skill. A capability is something that makes you more capable of coping with rapid change up ahead. So there's lots of different capabilities expressed around the world. Different organisations have certain ones, some school curriculums do. For just now, I'm going to focus in on 3. Believe me, you'll pretty well know them all. This one's thousands of years old, but it's now very, very necessary. It's kids becoming entrepreneurial. If I had another magic wand, I would decree that every 15-year-old in this country knew how to be not just an entrepreneur, but a social entrepreneur. So there is a 14-year-old girl up near Sanford, and she runs a weekend market selling greeting cards, turns over at least $100 each weekend, and she donates half of that to a local charity each time. I like what she's doing. I'm thinking to myself, imagine when she grows up and you're all in that aged care home. You better hope you've got kids like that who actually want to help you with it all. Here's a message for you. I took this image in a side alley in Hong Kong a few years ago. Hong Kong. Think outside the dodecahedron. I love it. I reckon the square is so 2010. You know how people say, think outside the square? A dodecahedron is a 12-sided polygon, so think like a soccer ball with 12 sides. So there's a message for you, and I see this everywhere I go around the world. This is one of the most successful dentistry practices in Australia, and it's in Mildura. So I was working there a few years ago, and I'm driving to the airport, and I see this. Anyway, pain-free dentistry, that in brackets it's got for most people. Anyone with a sense of humour's got me. Anyway, I go running over, and here's the waiting chairs inside, and they're shaped like giant teeth. I'll tell you what, they're in theme. But I love their thinking. You know, some things are too boring at the moment. We need to get off our butts and get out there. Put spice into it. You know, have some wow factor and all that sort of thing. You know, I mentioned this 14-year-old girl before. I see this entrepreneurial stuff in a lot of kids everywhere. There's a 15-year-old boy who lives 4 blocks from Suncorp, and on big game nights, he hires out his parents' front yard to people who want to park their cars there. Something like $25 a car, and if you've ever parked near there, you'll know that within 15 minutes you see this magic act where your car disappears, you know. Anyway, he hates big cars, so he charges extra for them. And then he pays a retainer to his parents for the loan of their front yard. You know, he turns over a couple of grand a year. Smart kid, you know. I had this young guy who approached me a couple of years ago, and he offered to paint the numbers on my rubbish bin down the front, you know, for just $10. I've since ended up with new rubbish bins, but I love his initiative. You know, a lot of kids are getting into this now. I love that spice. So even online, you can do heaps of this. Who in this room has ever used Fiverr? Fiverr.com. Okay, basically, what can you get done for a $5? I tell you can get anything done for a $5. Oh, pretty well. Like there's a guy in there who will get his dog to sing happy birthday to you for $5. Bear with me, this is what happens with people who think a bit differently. So you pay $5 into an escrow account, and then he takes a video of this dog howling with your name on its collar with the music on in the background. He sends it to you. He gets at least 40 jobs a day. I hope he feeds that dog filet mignon, I tell you, because it deserves it. However, there's a lot of kids getting into this. They're now getting sparked up. See, there's a guy in the States in 2015 who wrote a book called Excellent Sheep, and his claim was that universities are now conditioning students to come through and just be excellent sheep, who just do all the right things, not at the right time, don't question the status quo. No, get over it. Otherwise, a small percentage of the world's population, one of my many conspiracy theories, get away with whatever the bloody hell they want to. Okay, we need these kids to come through and ask the big questions. Important point. I love design thinking. Okay, like that girl designed her greeting cards like that. You know, so you start by empathising with the group. Like she empathised with her mother and her friends while they were drunk and complaining about not finding decent greeting cards. So she says, so tell me what sort of cards you'd like. Then she goes away and she designs some. She goes and gets prototypes made with a loan from her father. She comes back and tests them on the women, this time when they're sober. You know, she then sort of defines further and ideates more, goes back and forth, and then she sells something that's a real winner. Design thinking works with anyone, I tell you. And a wrap up on that one is the X Prize. I love this. xprize.com. It's the preeminent stimulus on this planet for people who want to come up with edgy ideas. Do yourself a favour and spend 5 minutes looking at it. They find people with big money as a reward incentive. So like the biggest one so far has been the $15 million prize for education on how to deliver on basic literacy and numeracy in very poor countries where they can't afford decent teachers. I love what they do. They've got a big one for women's safety around the world. There's all sorts of different stuff in it. Just magic. Here's the second capability, adaptive agility. I know it sounds a bit fancy, but bear with me. I'll only use fancy words when I think they're needed. I reckon we need that. We need the agility of being adaptive and responding to changing circumstances all the time. In terms of this one, okay, just me, I'm into like simple frameworks that people can understand where they're going. And I'm flat out helping someone else to change, so I just work on myself. And I reckon you need to be so meta-aware of self. I reckon when you're helping someone to change, you help them to help themselves. And one way is to show them clear process, and that's one of the many thousands. So that's what often happens. You know, like I had someone give me advice once in Sydney when I gave a bad presentation. I had a flu, I was really awful. He gives me advice, and he writes it all down for me. I'm in the taxi going to the airport, and I go into denial. I just go, I can't believe you wrote this about me, so I just put it away again. 2 weeks later, I went back to it, and then I went into resistance, saying he's wrong. I don't agree with him. It's not fair he wrote that. 3 months later, I went back to it again, and this time I was in adaptation, going, you know, there is something to what he said. And a year later, I realised it was the best advice I'd ever received. I was fully into it. But it took me a while to get used to it. Okay, I love different processes like that. Part of adaptive agility is realising that you've only got 28 hours each day, so you need to try and work out how to fit as much in as you possibly can. Oh, yeah, didn't you hear? Next year they're going to extend the day to 30 hours. Won't that be handy? You know what would be sad? We just cram it all in as well, wouldn't we? In terms of organising time, I reckon we need to do this. I call it the wardrobe principle. Now, this is as personal as I'm going to get here this afternoon. I own 37 shirts. I love prime numbers. Just do. So I own 37 shirts. Now here's the rule. If I buy a new shirt, an old one's got to go. That's it. St. Vinny's does well out of me. Trouble is organisations aren't doing that these days. They just get 38, 39, 56, 60, and so all the time starts to run out and people are exhausted, fewer people doing more, all that sort of stuff. We need to get rid of the old stuff sometimes and work out respectful ways of explaining how to get rid of it. Another obvious one is learning as a team. Why people go off by themselves all the time and do things is beyond me. We're meant to be together in most cases. We need to actually learn how to do that properly. Another great one is this. Learn how to fast track on learning. If you haven't got some sort of news feed set up, go and get one set up. So my favourite is Flipboard, but you might have a different one. It takes 5 minutes on your phone to just set it up, so you just follow different things and they come to you, so you don't have to go searching for it. News feeds are super handy in terms of coping with time. Then, by the way, this whole bit about, like adaptive agility, the issue is this. We have a blind spot with all of this. We used to live in a linear world back in that last millennium. Now we are living in a situation that's often exponential. We'll probably see as much change in the next 10 years as in the past 100 when it comes to technologies, okay? And some of this has been mentioned during the day. The whole BCIs definitely imminent. We've had all sorts of personalised assistants. The whole Internet of Things is going to be just fascinating. And by the way, within 30 years, mental telepathy, like the iPhone 28 is going to be a brain cap you'll wear, and just by thinking you'll send your thoughts to someone else. That means we'll be able to read your thoughts. Who in this room just broke into a cold sweat? Can I just check for a second? You talk about privacy, that'll be the ultimate privacy. Oh yeah, big stuff. There's lots of technologies coming through, especially even 4D printing. If you haven't heard of it before, look it up. Fascinating, extra dimension to it all. And the last capability, a bit deep and meaningful, but boy, is this one effective. Now, Steve Pinker, in The Better Angels of Our Nature, claims, and I believe correctly so, that in the past 2 centuries, we have improved in terms of empathy. Not everyone agrees with him. About 10% of researchers don't. I tend to concur with it. 200 years ago, we used to burn women at the stake if they had orange hair and we suspected they were a witch. That doesn't happen very much now, thank God. Okay, I'm being quite serious about the whole thing. However, there's gaps in it. Still, all that notwithstanding, we need to become more empathic. Here's why: because robots are starting to work out how to do it. Oh yes, Pepper's the best known robot. You'll see lots of Pepper next year at the Tokyo Olympics. Pepper has like voice recognition and also face recognition, and in an artificial sense he has empathy. He can see your face. We have 3,000 micro expressions on it, and he can deduce pretty well what you're thinking and feeling. Very artificial, of course. 30 years from now, who knows? You know that bit about like we'll never replace the human brain. I don't ever say never, but it's going to be a long time, probably the 21st century in full. Empathy is a big scene, and it also happens online too. Lots of ways of doing it. I love this app. Is there anyone in the room who's actually a volunteer for Be My Eyes? Okay, consider this one. It's a support free app for people who are blind or sight impaired. There are around 3 million signed up on it around the world. There are, I think, about 200,000 volunteers. So if someone down the road there in their unit takes out the milk tonight and can't see the use by date on it, they find their phone and they just turn this app on by voice and they hold it over the use by date, and it finds one of those 2 million people who go, you'll find it's November the 2nd. Isn't that brilliant? So don't ever say all the technology is just horrible for us. There's actually a lot of good to it. There's a lot of good to it. This is one of the big ones with empathy. It's learning how to listen again. That's my front veranda. I keep this sculpture on it with 2 ears to remind myself that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth in that proportion for a very important reason. I leave it there when someone's coming for lunch or dinner who talks too much. That's not you, Timo. I never left it there when you were there. However, the reason I mention this also is the language we use. So as I'm starting to wrap up here, hang in on this. We've got to put more hope in our language in terms of the future and all the rapid change coming up. Now, I'm not saying be perfect. I'm talking the realistic optimism, but we need to say things like, you know, it's not that it breaks down all the time. It's like, I've got different options on what to do about it. So start casting the shadow over yourself in terms of what you do all day, every day with your language. Where really do you put it? So when you come tagging over soon to have a talk with everyone else, how really will you express yourself? What words will you use? And they're obvious sort of ones. Who in this room's got too much to do? Like we all have, you know, get used to it and all that. There's some people, though, who seem to somehow fit it in. They get really smart about what they do. And by the way, the last one generally, it just looks hopeless. Stop saying that to kids. I've been at Saturday night dinner parties where I've heard adults talking like that with all the kids around hearing this. So if the children hear the grown-ups talking like that, what do you expect the kids to think and feel? You're robbing them of hope. You must never rob young people of hope. Otherwise, we change the whole planet. And here's how I can predict the future. It's pretty well what we do today, as I've kept saying. We need hope for good stuff up ahead. So I'm going to finish off with this. I have 2 words I just love when it comes to change and growth and development and so on. 2 words. Here's the first word. The first word is aha. I'm not into big words sometimes. Aha. Okay, now that's a photo of an old kitchen like cupboard of mine, and I had this like bread maker in there. And for about 5 years, it was a really tight fit because I had like that other little mixer on the left side, and then on the right side I had this old like, it was a gas oven that I used in camping sometimes. Anyway, it was really tight. And after 5 years, one day I suddenly went, why am I leaving that gas oven there? I never use it. So I took it out and I put it in a back cupboard, and it's still there somewhere, and now I can take the bread maker easily in and out. And I went, aha. Now you might think, this guy's an idiot. And you could be correct. However, it was like this like revelation. And before you again thinking I'm an idiot, you start thinking, do you have any ahas you need to have? Here's my last favourite word. I just love this word. The word is wow. I reckon it's about time we started to look for a lot of good that's on the planet. Because when I talk about like the 90% point, I honestly believe, given all the data I researched in terms of my own book, the world predominantly is an okay place. Oh, there's serious stuff out there. 1 in 7 people are in poverty in this country. There's a serious drought out there right now. Global warming really is happening. If you don't believe that, you're living in a rock somewhere. Okay, so there's tricky stuff going on. But we need people with hope and make the effort to do something about it. And we need to adulate more the amazing stuff going on, including things like this. I mentioned before that I was in Iceland last year. Like I have lots of frequent flyer points. I travel a lot. I'm very lucky. You know, at the moment about 400,000. Anyway, I cruise around. So I get to Iceland and I find this place called Diamond Beach. Wow. Here's this huge glacier and it breaks up into this like big lagoon. And you see these giant blocks of ice floating around in it. Then they go down this narrow creek out to the ocean, and then they float away, but then the tide often brings them back in and deposits them on the sand, and the sand is a black silicate. So you've got these massive, like giant diamonds for kilometres sitting on this black sand. It's called Diamond Beach. It's world famous. Now, I was standing there freezing my butt off, but I could not leave. I was just going, wow. So I wish upon you all the wows in the world. I thank you very much for your time here today. It was an honour to be with you.